Kafka has brought some of the biggest twists into the meta, and in this video, I'm going to talk about things that you need to know about her, whether you have her or not, as well as cover important questions like how game-changing some of the build decisions are, and most importantly, I will showcase the most insane teams you can build with her, and believe me, these teams are amazing and it's not something you want to miss out on. I honestly didn't think Kafka would be this good because there were a lot of rumors going around that she would end up inferior. But I'm happy to tell you that the woman who gave life to her character is pretty amazing if not broken. And so let's take a look at some of the teams that are currently dominating Memory of Chaos. First of all, we've got an interesting comp made up of Sampo, Bronya, Kafka, and a healer. Now, what's amazing about this team is the synergy with Kafka and Bronya. Basically, Kafka can trigger DOTs immediately upon using her skill, and the ultimate can also trigger shock state on the enemies as well. So, Bronya gives Kafka an extra turn, and with the massive attack buff in addition to sometimes having Bronya's attack boost from ultimate, Kafka will shred enemies to pieces. And let's not forget Sampo is also doing a lot of good damage from his DOTs, which will get triggered by Kafka's skill. However, there is a big drawback to using this team as well as few others, and that mainly has to do with an extremely high skill point usage. Activating Kafka's and Bronya's skill each turn puts a huge pressure on the skill point economy, especially if you're not using Luocha, because any other healer might need these skill points to keep the team alive. So in this case, you will most often use Sampo's basic attack, and this team becomes kind of a single target killer, but don't get me wrong, this is probably the most fun team I've played with so far, and the synergy is really good here. Also, the pressure on SP becomes lower if you have E1 Bronya, since then she has a chance to refund the 1 SP from her skill. Now, the next team is pretty unique. Silverwolf is yet again showing up here because it's made up of her, Kafka, Tingyun, and Bailu. This mono lightning team is amazing when the enemy has quantum weakness because, first of all, Silverwolf can consistently apply lightning weakness on them, but in addition, Tingyun's attack boosting coming from both skill and ultimate, as well as her restoring so much energy to Kafka, means that Kafka can dish out her ultimate really often. Although this team won't have that many DOTs going on, since Kafka will be the only one here doing the DOT damage. But regardless, it's a unique comp that you can build if you have Silverwolf. Also, one important thing I wanted to mention is that normally, Kafka's best in slot relic set is Sizzling Thunder, but with this comp and against quantum weak enemy, Genius of Brilliant Stars is way better for her. And I'm talking about actual personal damage increase you wouldn't otherwise see in other teams. Still, keep in mind this relic set has an extremely niche use case, but if you do have it, it's going to be amazing for Kafka in this team. Now, currently, I'm seeing a lot of player reports coming that Sampo, Kafka, Silverwolf, and Luocha is one of her best teams right now, which makes sense since you're getting a massive defense shred and resistance reduction from Silverwolf, while Luocha keeps the skill point economy happy and thriving, and Sampo is the best, or should I say top tier teammate you can pair with Kafka. So this team can easily clear the hardest content you'll go up against. But what about Luca? Well, he is also really good with Kafka. You've probably seen a team made up of him, Sampo, Kafka, and a healer in other content creator videos. And what I really like about Luca is that the bleed he applies from his skills scales super well with the enemy's health, although it does have its limit that's tied to his attack. So, as you can imagine, since Kafka can trigger the DOTs immediately with her skill, this bleed becomes amazing, especially since you don't actually reduce the remaining turns on the DOTs triggered. So, the enemy will keep bleeding and Kafka will keep smiling. Still, keep in mind this team is also extremely SP hungry, so the best healer unfortunately is the limited Luocha here. But you can make it work yet again by sometimes not using Sampo's skill if you want to use another healer. And also, Luca's skill only needs to be triggered seldom, since his bleed lingers around for 3 turns. I mean, however you look at it, the fact that you can trigger DOT damage that ranges from 30 to 80k is insane, and this team is super fun to play. Oh, and of course, you could replace Luca with Serval here, who by the way can have her shock exist along with Kafka's. However, one of the best things about triple DOT team that has Luca is that he can equip on himself Pearls of Sweat Light Cone, which helps him reduce the enemy's defense further with his ultimate, while Serval is an erudition unit, so she can even equip this great defense shred cone. In fact, if you're running this triple DOT team, using before the tutorial mission starts Light Cone on Kafka can help her regain energy so fast. Most of the times, you will be able to trigger her ultimate every 2 turns, since Luca will be shredding enemies' defense with his ultimate and Pearls of Sweat Light Cone. Finally, one of the more quirky team comps that is a bit experimental at this point, but it's made up of Himiko, Asta, Kafka, and of course, a healer. You know, I've been mentioning healers all the time, but you can use a preservation unit, provided that they can keep the team alive. But I digress. So this team is pretty funny because both Asta and Himiko can produce fire DOT on enemies, so of course Kafka can trigger them with her skill, but in addition, Asta can boost her attack and increase her speed, which are both important when building Kafka. So yeah, these are the teams that have had most success with her, and there's definitely a lot of variations you could go for. For example, instead of using Silverwolf, you could use Palin and team with Sampo and Healer, so keep in mind these teams are not set in stone. Now when it comes to Kafka's build considerations, they aren't that super complex, but there are some major things you need to be aware of. Basically, you want to build her with attack body and either attack or speed boots. If you have her signature light cone, going with attack boots is fine, but for the most part, there are certain breakpoints that allow her to take more turns, as you can see here. So you can aim for these thresholds as long as you can hit them. Just keep in mind that if you play her with Sampo or other DOT character, make sure she has at least one less speed than them, so that they can take their turn first, and then she can trigger the DOTs with their skill. Now, as for the main relic set, obviously Sizzling Thunder Force set is amazing for her, but if you don't have it, you can go with the 2-piece Hacker Sizzling or Sizzling and Musketeer. As for planner ornaments, it's super simple. Lightning damage sphere and attack percent rope. You can go with break effect instead, but it's not always easy to guarantee Kafka will be the one breaking the enemy toughness, so attack percent remains far more reliable. And honestly, there's not much to the sets themselves. Space Sealing Station is by far her best in slot. Although again, if you want to go with that break effect build, then Talia Kingdom of Banditry is a good choice. And as for the overall build, you can see the overview here. Just focus on speed and attack percent substats, while picking up some effect hit rate won't hurt you along the way. Now luckily, even if she applies status conditions on enemies, you don't need much effect hit rate. In fact, you only need 10% from substats, because the other 18% comes from her traces, which is perfectly enough to land her shock DOTs consistently. But here's where a bit of complexity comes in. So there's a lot of good light cones for our mommy character, but which one you should go for? Well, truth be told, if you haven't got the signature cone or the Good Night Sleep Well 4-star Gacha cone, then her best choice is going to be Fermata, which you can easily obtain from the Forgotten Hall shop. In fact, I would argue Fermata is really strong on her because at max superimposition, she will consistently deal 32% more damage, and even when she breaks enemies, she will have 32% more break effect. Although Good Night Sleep Well does outperform it when using her in a team with other Nihility debuff characters. But I wouldn't sweat it too much, because the only sweat you do need to care about has to do with the pearls, and that usually goes on to Sampo or Luca. All in all, everything else shown here would be her best and recommended cones, but keep in mind only the signature light cone comes out on the top. But even then, I would say her selection of light cones is super flexible, so you don't have to worry which one is best for her because the selection process is pretty easy. So I think in terms of the so-called meta that's honestly kind of similar to Genshin's, I would say Kafka is a pretty strong unit, but the biggest thing about her has to be her ability to enable multiple new teams, which in my opinion is the most exciting aspect of any new character. She deals good damage. I often would see her ultimate ranging from 70 to 110,000, and then afterwards enemies would take 30 to 50,000 DOT damage depending on the team comp, which in my opinion is pretty impressive. Not to mention the fact it's funny to watch my foes die before they can take their turn. And what's amazing here is that I have some of the worst relics equipped on her, so imagine how much better she would be with proper stats. Still, if I had one minor complaint, then it would be the skill point problems that you'll run into unless you're using Luocha. I will admit it, initially I thought Luocha was only good because of the enemy lineups we had when he first came out, but now it's pretty clear that the best selling point about him is the auto healing that doesn't require that many skill points. With any other healer, you will quickly notice how you will run out of SP pretty fast, especially in triple DOT team with Sampo and Luca, or the Bronya comp I showcased earlier. So you need to resort to things like Sampo only using his basic attack to preserve some of that SP. And I'm not sure if Kafka's at fault here. Maybe once we get a new DOT character who isn't skill point hungry, then we can see teams that are more flexible with healers other than Luocha. Or maybe we get a healer who is similar to the coughing guy and can heal without using that much SP. Also, when it comes to her Eidolons, her first one is seriously busted. It's a bit specific and requires more hit rate than usual to make it work all the time, but she gets about 19% damage increase, which you won't see happen again until E6. And her second Eidolon is literally made for DOT teams, but that would be pushing too hard if you're free to play. Although if you still enjoy using her after a while, maybe on her rerun you can go for E2. But overall, I think Kafka is a great character that has a fun new playstyle, enables fun new teams, and I can finally have her look at me like I'm not worthy of her. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Just like the last time, I did not get invited to Hoyoverse server so that I could record this video in advance, which of course puts on me a lot of stress to get this video done in a timely manner. So I really appreciate all of you who like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.